And then when he calls the exact
Time to start. Ready? Oh,
yeah.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Called to order by Owen here.
There you go.
All right. Good morning to you on this beautiful day. If you were a bunch of cheetahs, we would call you an ambush. So let's begin with our pledge. I pledge allegiance
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
and of the things we think, say, or do.
Is it the truth? Is it our concern? Will we live well in our friendships? Will we live in the laws?
All right. Thank you very much and welcome again to Rotary. Today is October 21st, the year 2025. It's the 294th day of the year. The Badgers are 0-4 in the conference, 2-5 altogether. Gophers are 3-1 and 5-2 altogether. Packers are 4-1. Vikings are 3-3, and the Brewers are playing golf. Was a disappointing ending, wasn't it?
Yes.
Anyway, things you probably don't know, don't need to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Swiss Air Force dropped severed chicken heads all over the Swiss forests. It's a lot of chicken heads. The chicken heads contained a vaccine against rabies, and it was aimed at vaccinating wild foxes against that disease. So if you're ever someplace and you find a chicken head, it could be I guess. We don't have any birthdays this week, no anniversaries this week. Our guest, Pat Zietlow Miller, glad to have you with us. And Owen over here is also our guest. He rang the bell this morning, so that looks good. And a poem to kind of get us going, or maybe not today. Let's see what happens. For me, there's a special 5 weeks, mid-October to mid-November. Mom and Dad's anniversary, and all 4 of our birthdays to remember. It's a melancholy time of remembering childhood days when 3 hours meant go outside and play. Kids gathered in the street, alley, yard, or park. Games of football, frisbee, hide and seek, and even charts. My brother and I talked for an hour, sharing recollections in our heads. We started ticking off who of the old gang is dead. Tom and I agreed that if a great childhood be sought, ours on Princeton Avenue could never be bought. When we finished, I sat quietly amidst my contemplation, smiling of the days before adult complications. The reverie of thought brought an hour of peace. Such great joy traveling back, I didn't want it to cease. A changing breeze through the window ushered in the reality cart. The mundane shoved out the sublime when I suddenly got to wonder if my snowblower would start. All right, there you go.
All right. All right, Owen, should we talk about what's happening next? Ready? So now our job is to tell everybody that it's time for the member minute. And the member minute today is from Steve. All right? We're gonna welcome Steve. Okay?
Good job, Owen.
Good job.
It's like I've done a few of these, but so I grew up in a town of about 600 people in the middle of North Dakota, very small town. And I went to North Dakota State University and studied chemistry. Met my wife, Nan, there. At North Dakota State, in their chemistry department, you can study polymers and coatings technology. And I got a scholarship, paid my tuition for 2 years if I would take those courses, and I did. And I've worked in the paint industry my entire career. First big stint, we lived in Rockford, Illinois for 17 years. I worked for the Valspar Corporation, and then we moved to Sun Prairie in 1992, and we love Sun Prairie. And worked for Tim and Beth Melcarrick and Hall and Lindsay Paints, and retired in 2017. Nan's a dietitian. She was chief dietitian at St. Anthony Hospital in Rockford when we were there, and came here, and she worked for Physicians Plus, which then became UW Health, which then became Quartz, and then she retired. One of the things that when moving here in 1992, my parents really modeled a lot of community involvement and volunteerism, and I really enjoyed that. I was fortunate. The two companies that I worked most of my career for, Valspar was very much into community service, and so gave me the time to do that a lot in Rockford. And then when I came here, those of you who know that Tim and Beth, very engaged in Sun Prairie, in the state of Wisconsin, and really in all the communities that they have stores. And so, you know, fortunately been able to do a lot of things here and be involved with a lot of terrific groups. So when I first came, Dave Petrie recruited me to Exchange Club, so I did that for a while, and then I got involved in Civic Theater and was in a couple of shows. I was in Man La Mancha and Guys and Dolls, and then, you know, one thing just leads to another. Then Sarah got old enough to join Sound of Sun Prairie, and then next thing I know, I'm on the board of the Band Boosters in Sun Prairie, which is not a small job in most communities. That is a small job, but being on the Band Booster board in Sun Prairie, and I was president for 2 years, you know, you got a big budget for that band and for the jazz band, so that was a lot. And I've been on church council, and Dick Wright recruited me to Rotary in 2003, so it's been 22 years now in Rotary, and my involvement in Rotary just was the invitation of Michael Johnson and Jake Brown to come to a meeting, and I ended up on the leadership group for Boys and Girls Club. So I just, if you're noticing a pattern here, I just seem to go from one thing to the next, but I count it as a great blessing that all the groups that I've been able to be involved in Sun Prairie, we love this community, and we had a good time at the Badger game, didn't we, Deb? So that's kind of, you know, I guess that's a minute or so. That's us. Yeah.
Okay, so now what we do is we say thank you to Steve, because that was very nice of him to do that. And now we are going to have a little segue here, and Michael has a presentation about the budget and dues and all kinds of information. So,
Would you like
Michael?
to introduce who you're carrying on?
Shouldn't I? So this is my grandson Owen, who is visiting from LA on his way to Ithaca, and his mom, who has a job at Cornell, has to work this week. And it's been a little complicated trying to find time with her. So he's coming with me to the Y today, to Y childcare. We can't do that until later. And Mom's in one of this Rotary, and we thought, you know what? I think we can make this work. So here he is. How old is he? He is 19 months. So, doing great. All right, we're gonna walk backwards, we can let Michael talk, okay? Here we go. Okay, off we go. We're gonna listen back to.
So, fact, we'll do a member 20 seconds here. About a year and a half ago, we were trying to figure out why I am the way I am, if I'm on the autism spectrum. Lots of things were asked, lots of things were figured out. And one of the things we figured out is that I needed to see visualizations. If you said things to me, it just right through. So it's really good that we all have name tags, but for the same purpose, I need to see charts and graphs. So when Jim came up with all this beautiful math last week, I was like, I need to find a way to make this palatable for people like me. So I came up with a presentation. It's only 7 slides. It's way less than my annual meetings. So our Rotary dues go into 5 big buckets. The international takes up a big piece. So there's the international registration, there's the international insurance, there's the district piece of it, there's club runner, and then what's left of that goes to this Rotary Club. What we found in 2015 when we moved things from, what was it, 60 a quarter from 35 a quarter? We went from $35 a quarter to 60 a quarter. When we had it in 2018, the Sun Prairie Rotary was getting about $99 per person. What you'll see is that the little sliver for Sun Prairie started really big and has gotten really small because all the other expenses have gone up dramatically. So what we have is each person paying $99 into the club a decade ago, and now we're down to $40. When you figure there are 10 less members than there were, and everyone's giving $50 less, we have come up with quite a shortfall. It's about $3,000 difference that we're coming into. The biggest increase we found were the international fees. So we've tried to hold steady with our fees, but we found that everyone else is charging a lot more, and the little things that cause these meetings to run and to cause the whole group to work, we're getting thinner on the budget side. You want to talk about these expenses, or you want me to keep on going? Okay. Within this group, we've got several different expenses throughout the year. Breakfast costs are something that I would have never imagined how much those little things are. That was one of our major line items at $1,200 a year. So we lined up all the things we got. We went less the happy dollars, and then we figured out what that 40 something per person was. And we have been spending down a surplus slowly year after year after year. It is causing undue health concerns to Jim each year as he looks at our budget. So he brought up the idea of raising fees. We wanted to see what our fees look like compared to everyone else. They go all over the place. with some of the groups doing lunchtime meetings. There are lunchtime expenses that are thrown in. Some do those automatically. Some kind of take your money if you're not eating. There's a little bit of everything. But what we found was that if you threw in all the meals, assuming you came every week, you ate every week, you get the third column. We found that the Sun Prairie rates were probably really low compared to the others around. Questions on any of these fees?
Well, just a comment, but we don't eat lunch. All of those people eat lunch.
Yeah, we have a $3 thing for our pastries compared to their $12 meals. So the quarterly fees are what we compared in the second column. We were the lowest in quarterly fees, and then we had the lowest meals based on doing a breakfast meeting versus a lunch meeting. So it made for the lowest Rotary fees by far. So Jim targeted a certain dollar amount that he felt would help us break even and start filling the coffers a little bit. And it was $20 per quarter. We felt that was a pretty palatable change. $20 a quarter doesn't seem like much, but when you add that up for every person times 4, it starts evening things out. The only other thing that we talked about was the idea that going forward, some of the big events that you saw there, the holiday party, the annual picnic, they've been lost leaders within the Rotary, coming up with a small surcharge, like a ticket price. We threw out things like $10 a ticket, something like that, just to make them more neutral versus negative. So going into the next quarter, you'll see 2 changes. A $20 increase in your quarterly dues. And then when the holiday party comes around, you might see a $10 ticket cost or something like that. $20, $350 a ticket. Is that what you were floating out there? But that's it. Any questions? Jim worked really hard on this and has lots of information if you have questions.
I have a question about, if you go back to the slide on expenses. The mural was a one-time sponsorship, but do you have a breakdown of what the annual dues are for the district and for the and for international? Is that per year?
The right side, you see the 2025 year.
Okay, so we each pay $240 plus breakfast if you eat breakfast right now. And between the dues, that's $170, which leaves $90 per member beyond that. So I guess I'm really trying to understand.
$40.66 per month.
But what are those other expenses? No, between international dues and district dues, it's $90. I see the club runner in there, but where does that other money go?
Where's the $40 going to?
Yeah, plus the happy dollars, plus all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Those events.
Because we're picking up all the costs for the picnic and the holiday party?
That's correct. Those kinds of expenses, when we plant a tree, it comes out of that budget. They're all coming out of the same budget line items.
Right.
So if we're sending someone to one of the clinics, what's the annual meeting called? Yes.
Yeah, that we have.
Those all come out of the same small budget that we have. Any other questions? Thanks. Thank you, guys.
Jen, this actually has to be voted on.
As a whole, right? Okay. So,
It probably should be pointed out that this is just the club side. This is just Sun Prairie Rotary Club. There's also a Sun Prairie Rotary Foundation, which has a completely different set of financials.
Correct.
That's our fundraising arm and our charitable giving arm. So this is just the club.
Absolutely good thing to bring up, and two things with that, and then we need to take a vote on the dues as well. So the first is that we're gonna have some information next week about some of that charitable giving, and that we're gonna have a conversation about every Rotarian every year. So we're gonna get a presentation about that. And then the foundation team is working on a presentation, and Overlay is working on a presentation to give us quarterly reports as to where the foundation is financially. So we all have an understanding of that as well. You are correct. There's lots of information to learn about how the funding works, where it goes, and what we can and cannot do as well. So obviously, we want to keep giving, how do we do that? So that request was made, and quickly jumped on that. She's working on it. We'll have that presentation as well. And Hannah, I think that she talk a little bit about every Rotarian every year. That being said, the executive board met and discussed this, really, and we approved it. However, it needs to be approved by the group as a whole as well. Now, how formal do we get with this? This is something I don't know. Do I need to ask a
Motion to approve.
Thank you. So motion to approve. Thank you. A second? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. So we will have those dues effective in the next quarter. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the information. And we will go forth and do good things with what we have. So thank you. Melissa.
Say something. I would be willing to pay a little bit more for the holiday party to keep the annual picnic free, because I think that's really important to members or invite other people there.
All right, good to know. Okay, awesome. Well, speaking of the holiday party, I'm going to launch it now that it is not too early to start planning, and we would love to have somebody who would like to help plan that. 2 people who would like to help plan that. If you're interested, let me know. Otherwise, I might start asking you if you're interested in helping plan the holiday party. But that we would like to have either December, usually that's a little harder, but January is when we've had it in the past traditionally. So we were looking for someone to help lead that cause. Would you like to help, Owen? Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Today's last day to gather trick or treat donations for the navigators. I see some in the back. That's fantastic. So we're looking for some more of those. And we do have a sign for that event so that when folks come to the navigators stand to gather candy, they will see that the candy was provided by Rotary. So get our name out there for that. A big thank you to everybody who helped at the Badger game this past Saturday. It was a lot of fun. It's a terrible game. It was a lot of fun. So thanks to everybody who helped out with that. Lots and lots of work. Big thanks to Debbie who helped lead our team there. All right, Rotary Moments.
This is from back in September when we had the old Turkish people, Turkish. So I have a few postcards from when they were here. John and Rose are not here today, but I'd like a couple. And I mailed them to Erkin, as well as the address that they have plenty to share amongst themselves. So I'll leave these here. So please feel free to take them if you have fun on these other.
Any other Rotary moments? Talk of money has made everybody somber. I understand. Anything else? Any more moments?
All right. With that, then, ready for our next job? You can turn this over. Now it's time for our speaker. And our speaker today is presented by Teresa. So I'll let you introduce Teresa.
We're gonna walk this way.
Good morning. I am pleased to present Pat Zietlow Miller. She is a New York Times bestseller author. She has written and published over 25 books to date. She really thrives in the children's area of publishing, and Pat started her career in newspapers and then went to insurance for a while, And then she boldly decided to chase her dreams and started writing. So Pat also is on our library board foundation. She has served over 5 years with us. And all I can say is I'm really sad Pat only has 2 feet because she has a fabulous collection of brightly colored sneakers. Just her shoe collection is incredible.
Just walk in front so you can.
Without further ado, I present Pat Zietlow Miller.
Well, hi, thanks for having me. As Teresa said, I'm Pat Zietlow Miller. I live in Sun Prairie. I've lived here for 8 years, and I write books for kids. And right now, it's what I do full time, and hopefully, it will be what I do full time for the entire of my future. I had wanted to write books for kids pretty much since I was 19 years old, and I was in college. But I grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is not exactly a hotbed of publishing, and I didn't know anybody who had ever published a book. But when I was 19, I thought, wouldn't it be great to write a picture book? So I sat down at my Electrolux typewriter because computers really weren't a thing then. And I typed out a picture book, and the internet was also not a thing. And so I didn't really know what to do with that book. And so I sent it off to a publisher whose address I had found inside a book I read. And I got it off in the mail, and I waited. And several months went by, and I got a Xeroxed form rejection that said, thanks so much for thinking of us, but, you know, it's not right for us. And since I was 19, I thought, well, you know, I tried. And I didn't do anything else related to writing for kids. I graduated from college, I got a job, I got married, I got a master's degree, I got a better job, I had kids. And for the next 20 years, I didn't do anything towards my goal of writing for kids, but it was always in the back of my mind that that was something I wanted to do. So when I was 39, 20 years after I made my first attempt, I was a lot smarter then. And I thought, you know, if I don't really try to do this, it's never going to happen. It'll be the one thing, you know, when I'm 80 or 90 and look back in my life that I regret not really trying. Now, by this time, the internet existed and I knew how to use it. And so I did a ton of research to find out how actually would you go about writing for kids. And I had always done some form of writing, whether it was being a newspaper reporter or working in corporate communications at American Family Insurance, where I was for 18 years. And I was still at American Family at this time. And I started spending all my extra time that I wasn't at work or with my kids, either reading children's books or writing really bad children's books. But I got better, and I took classes, and I read more, and I learned more. And I sort of treated writing for kids like it was a part-time job in addition to my full-time job. And it took me 4 years of doing that. And during those 4 years, I got 126 rejections because I was submitting some of these bad children's stories, not aware that they were bad. I thought they were good. But I got 126 rejections during those 4 years. And then finally, I got a yes. And the cool thing about publishing, you know, for a book is you only need one yes, even if all the other editors said, no, you need one editor who likes it. And so I sold my first manuscript. It came out in 2013. And since then, I've got more than 20 books out in the world. It took me probably 8 more books until I was able to leave American Family and do it full time. And one of them hit the New York Times bestseller list, which helped a lot. Because the thing about writing for kids is there's no health insurance and there's no benefits. And so I had to get to a point where I'm like, okay, I can pay for my health insurance and I can make sure that myself and my family are, you know, still going to be okay. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you a little bit about like how I get some of the ideas for my books, and I brought props. Okay, so the first book that I sold is this one. It was called Sophie Squash. And people always say, well, how do you get ideas for children's books? And so for Sophie Squash, I got the idea from my youngest daughter, Sonia. When she was about 3, we were in a grocery store and she was sitting in the cart and I was pushing the cart and I'm putting all the groceries in the cart that we're going to buy. And I picked up a butternut squash and I put it in the cart. And, you know, we finish the shopping, we go to check out. I'm taking all the groceries out of the cart, putting them on the conveyor belt so I can pay for them. And I realized that I can't find the butternut squash. And my daughter, Sonia, has picked it up and she's holding it in her arms and she's rocking it like it's a baby. Because, you know, they're shaped kind of like a baby. And so we paid for it. I took it home. She put a face on it with markers and she carried it everywhere. Now, when I go and talk to kids at schools, I always say, do you think we ever ate that squash? So do you think we ate it? No. And then it's funny because I ask kids, well, why didn't we eat the squash? And it's like clockwork. Some boy will raise his hand. It's always a boy. And I say, why didn't we eat the squash? And he goes, well, because she put marker on it, and eating marker is gross. And I said, well, okay, that's true. You know, that would be gross, but why else didn't we eat it? And then it's always a girl that raises her hand and goes, because it was her friend. And she looks at the boy like, duh. And so we didn't eat the squash. And then I tell the kids, you know, so if you only remember one thing from me coming and talking to you today, it should be that we don't eat our friends. And so talk about, you know, Sonia, my daughter, carrying the squash around and taking it with her everywhere. And I thought, you know, that's got to be unusual. I can't imagine too many other people have kids that fall in love with produce. So I wrote this book, and the cool thing about writing fiction is you can make things end the way you wish they would have in life rather than the way they really did. So here's what happened in real life. Sonia carried her squash around, and you know, it's a vegetable. So eventually it's going to get mushy and gross and rot. And so I, as a parent, was concerned about this. So when her squash friends started to like show signs of aging, what I did in real life was I threw it away and I bought her a new one. And she was okay with that. You know, it was all good. And we did this, you know, a couple times as things went on. And around the same time, she was also carrying around one of those like small miniature bags of flour. And I'm like, okay, that's a disaster waiting to happen, because if she drops it, it's just gonna be. So I'm like, let's just keep the squash and let's not do the flour. So when I was writing the book, I thought, well, how could I have made it a better story rather than mom throws the squash away and buys a different one? And so I thought, well, what if Sonia had planted the squash, you know, and then a new squash plant had grown. And so that's what happens in the book. And in the book, the main character gets the squash from a farmer's market rather than a grocery store, because farmer's markets are more fun to illustrate. And I did change the name, even though my daughter's name is Sonia, the book is called Sophie Squash, because picture books are meant to be read out loud, and it's much easier to say Sophie's squash than Sonia's squash. I did dedicate it to her, so her name is on the inside. But when it finally came out, several of her friends at school were kind of annoyed at me that I had changed the name in the book. But life goes on. So that's how my first book came out. And that's how I got the idea. And Sonia, my daughter, it has inspired actually a couple of my books. She inspired this one, and this one isn't, she's not as proud of this particular story, because when she was maybe 8, she was taking a nap, and I had to wake her up because she had volleyball practice. And I did think, well, maybe I'll just let her sleep. But then I thought, no, you know, she made a commitment to the team. It's volleyball practice time. So I woke her up, and she had like the meltdown to end all meltdowns. Like the one where you use the parrot kind of just look at them on the floor and go like, wow, that's impressive. You know, and so I was not having it. So I tossed her in the car. I drove her to volleyball practice. By the time we got there, she calmed down. I sat on the bleachers while she practiced and questioned all my life choices. And then when it was over, I get her in the car and I looked at her and I said, what was that all about? You know, meaning the temper tantrum. And she looked at me and in complete seriousness said, I was a hibernating bear. You woke me up and I went into a bear frenzy. Well, I stopped being mad at her after that because that was pretty awesome. And so I started thinking I could use that. And so I wrote a book called Wide Awake Bear. And initially it was about a bear that was hibernating with his mom, wakes up in the middle of winter. It's cold, it's dark. He doesn't know what's going on. And initially he had like a temper tantrum. But the cool thing about writing is like, most of my work isn't writing the initial draft, it's revising it to make it good. And that the temper tantrum didn't really work because like, why was he mad? And so it would be more likely that he would be scared if he woke up in the middle of winter and it was dark and it was cold and he didn't know what was going on. So I changed it so that he was scared when he woke up. And then his mom wakes up and they talk about how, you know, spring is waiting underneath the snow and everything's going to be fine. But she also inspired that particular story. So I get some of my ideas from my kids. My oldest daughter, you know, I think was feeling a little left out. And so this one is hers. And she inspired it, but not so much by what she did. I had one of those parent moments where I was watching her. She was 10. And I was suddenly struck by the fact that she was only going to be living in my house for 8 more years. And then she was going to be off to college. And that just hit me as like a very short amount of time that I still had her under my roof. And so I wrote this book, Wherever You Go, is kind of like my love letter to her with like all the wisdom that I wanted to give her as she went off into the world. And ironically, it came out the year she graduated from high school. And it's become like a graduation book. Like this was in every Target in the country. And a lot of people give it as a graduation present. So it's kind of like, you know, as you go into the world, what do you want to do and what do you want to accomplish? So she got her book as well. And then sometimes I get ideas because an editor that I've worked with gives me an assignment. Most things I write, I kind of write on spec. I write them and I hope someone's going to like it enough to buy it. Doesn't always happen, but that's how it works. But sometimes editors say, hey, you know, I want to publish a book about a garden on top of a school. Would you write one? And I said, sure. So I did a ton of research about school gardens, and there are schools that have a garden like on their roof, and the kids and the teachers make it happen. And so I did a ton of research. I wrote this book, and I mentioned before about revision. This one I revised 24 times. I had the topic, and I would send it off to the editor, and she'd go, well, I like it fly. And so I went around and around and around and tried it like 18 different ways before we finally hit a version we both liked. But this one ended up being a Dolly Parton Imagination Library selection, which is really cool. I haven't met Dolly, but I like to think she's maybe read my book. I think she's actually got a committee of people that choose the books, but still, it's a Dolly Parton book. And then a different editor said, I want a book about kindness. Would you write a book about kindness? And so I said, sure. And just to show it doesn't always work out, I wrote a draft, I sent it to her, and she said, that's not what I had in mind at all. And I said, well, what did you have in mind? And she couldn't really tell me. And so I started thinking back, to my life. And I thought, well, what were times that people were kind to me? And I remembered a time when I was dating the man who would eventually become my husband. We were in the car, he was driving, I was in the passenger seat. This is important. The interior of his car was light gray. I was wearing white pants and I was drinking grape soda. So maybe you can see where this is going. He went over a bump. The grape soda went all over me, all over my pants, all over the gray interior of his car. And if my dad had been driving and I had done that in his car, like I would have been spending the next several weeks cleaning out the inside of his car, and he would not have been happy. But my future husband looked at me and said, it's okay, we'll clean it up. And so you should always marry somebody who, says things like that. So I took that idea and I started the book out like this. It says, Tanisha spilled grape juice yesterday all over her new dress. So she spilled the grape juice, and then a kid, one of her classmates, starts thinking about how could he be kind. And he starts going through ideas in his head, and he tries something and it doesn't work. And so then he has to think about, well, what else could I do? So it gets the reader thinking about, what actually does it mean to be kind? And so that one worked out. I've also actually gotten book ideas from social media. 2 of my books were inspired by things on Twitter, which is now X. This is my nonfiction book. It's Unstoppable John. It's about John Lewis, the congressman from Georgia and the civil rights leader. And he won a National Book Award for a graphic novel that he helped create called March, about his experience with the civil rights movement. And when he was accepting the National Book Award, he talked about how he couldn't get a library card when he was 16 because he grew up in the Deep South, Jim Crow laws, the library was not open to him. But he asked for one anyway, even though he knew they'd tell him no. And then he talked about how he would get library cards now from different libraries around the country. So he has had a collection of library cards that people would give him. And so I saw that in a tweet also, and I did some more research, and I ended up writing a book about how he asked for a library card, was told no, and then how libraries and reading became such a huge part of his life. This is my newest one. It also was inspired by a tweet by an English teacher in Indiana. It was during the pandemic, and the English teacher had left some books at the end of his driveway for a family he knew to come and pick up children's books. And he wrote a tweet about it, and he had pictures. And there was just something about it, and it reminded me of how books can connect people. So this is one can be, and it's about a child who works with her community to create a little free library to share books. But this book would never have existed if I didn't see the tweet from that English teacher. And then finally, sometimes I get ideas that I don't even know where they come from. They just sort of hit me. This one, I was in a meeting at American Family that was frankly pretty boring. And so my mind was wandering. And all of a sudden, the first couple lines of it hit me. This is a Thanksgiving book. It had nothing to do with the meeting at all. But all of a sudden, in my head were the 2 lines. So I wrote them down. I went back to my desk. I emailed them to myself at home. And then I went home and went from there. And this one, I got the idea while I was taking a shower. And one of my friends always says, you shouldn't tell people that. I'm like, what? Everybody showers. So I was taking a shower, and I got the idea for this one. It's a book about best friends. And it just sort of came into my head. There's something that I've noticed. Perhaps you've seen it too. Life is so much better when it's me and you. And so I just kind of went with that, took a very long shower as I kind of kept it going in my head, dried myself off, typed it up, and then did a ton of revision, but it ended up being my book about best friends. So ideas can come from anywhere. And then I want to show you what happens after the idea. So I get the idea, I start to write, and I just write in a Word document, you know, so it's just words on a piece of paper. And picture books are short, so quite often it looks more like a poem than it does a picture book. And I revise and revise. I get comments from editors, which are what's in the track changes over here, and I do some more revising. And eventually, hopefully, the story sells. And I do not do my own artwork. There's some people that write the words and do the art, but no one would want a picture book that I illustrated. So then what happens is the publisher matches me with an artist. And they know artists all around the world. I've had artists work in my books from Colombia and Korea and Switzerland and Wisconsin, and you know, it just varies. And so once we think the text is as good as we can possibly make it, my job's done. And then it goes off to the illustrator, and it can take an illustrator 1 to 2 years to illustrate a picture book, because you know that's a lot of art. And I'll get updates along the way, like for Unstoppable John, I'll get sketches. These are from Jerry Jordan. He actually lives in Madison. It's the only time I've had an illustrator, you know, live in the same area I live in. Lives in Madison, Wisconsin. This was his second picture book, and so I'll get sketches that I can look at to kind of see what he's thinking. And then if I see anything that's like factually wrong, I can point it out. But usually I only point out factual errors because I always figure the illustrator wasn't looking over my shoulder while I was writing, going, you know, don't you think you should put a comma there? And why is the character doing that? So I let them do their thing unless it's factually wrong. And then eventually, this is from a different book, I get color proofs so I can kind of see what the art is going to look like, which is my favorite part. And then after that, I get something that kind of looks like a book. You can flip through it, but if I shook it, it would all fall apart. It's called A Folded and Gathered, which is a weird name, but it's my last chance to look at the book and make sure that everything looks the way that it needs to look before it goes and gets printed. And then eventually after that, it's a book and it's on a shelf and it's in libraries and bookstores and people can buy it. And it's out of my control and people might like it or they might not. And so usually I've got things going on at multiple stages. I've got something new that I'm writing that hasn't sold yet. I've got things that I'm revising with an editor in the process of becoming a book. I've got art coming in for books that are in process. And then the thing I didn't really expect is how much marketing you have to do once you have a book come out. I mean, the publisher does quite a bit of marketing, but a lot of it is also on the author. So like social media and interviews and blogs and random emails. And sometimes I think I spend more of my time doing marketing than I actually do writing. So it's always a challenge to kind of keep it all balanced and together. But that's what I do. And like I said, it probably took me 8 books in before I was able to make this my full-time career. And I'm just so grateful that it did, because it's something, like I said, that I wanted since I was 18. And then the fact that it actually all came together and worked out and happened is cool. And so what I want to do is sort of an inspiration is actually read you one of my books, because it kind of ties in. So this is Remarkably You. The art's by Patrice Barton, words are by me. And this one has an interesting story behind it. If you remember when I said I wrote the initial draft of Be Kind and the editor said that wasn't what I had in mind at all. So I wrote the different version that sold, but I hung on to the original one that one editor didn't like. And I still liked it. And so I thought, well, maybe I could switch it around. So it's not about kindness, but it's about something different. So I worked on it some more, and it ended up becoming this book that sold to a different author. So sometimes, or a different editor. So sometimes, you know, it's not like if one editor doesn't like it, the book's not good. It's just that it wasn't a good fit for them. And so when I wrote this one, I was thinking about, you know, all the kids that I encounter in my life and then in school visits that I do. And, you know, kids are so different, and every kid has their own skill set or things that they are good at. But sometimes schools seem to, you know, reward certain types of skills. Like if you're, you know, really verbally smart, you get a lot of attention. Or, you know, if you're a really good musician or a really good athlete, you get a lot of attention. But if you're a kid that has skills in different areas, you don't maybe get all that recognition. So I tried to think of all the different ways the kids could be smart and put them in this book. But it's also for adults, because I read this once and a guy I worked with came up to me and he was nearing retirement age. And he said, this is exactly the book I needed, because there's things I want to do that I've been too worried or, nervous about to actually pursue. And after hearing your book, he says, I think I'm going to go do them. So here we go. You might be bold, you might be loud, leading parades, drawing a crowd. You might be timid, you might be shy, quietly watching your neighbors go by. You might be small, one tiny sprout, learning new things when you're out and about. You might be big, practically grown, coming and going with friends of your own. No matter your volume, your shape, or your size, you have the power to be a surprise. You have the know-how, you're savvy and smart. You could change the world. Are you willing to start? Don't sit on the sidelines. Be part of the fray. Go after your passions a little each day. Find what needs fixing, repair what you can, then choose a new problem and do it again. Perhaps you're uncertain, not sure what to do. Just look for the moments that let you be you. Like maybe you're funny or bookish or fast, or maybe you're always decidedly last. Perhaps you like counting or drawing all day, or finding invisible dragons to slay. You have your own spirit, unparalleled flair, so rock what you've got every day, everywhere. Perhaps you wander or wonder or sing. The world needs your voice and the gifts that you bring. You can make a difference in big ways or small. You won't know how much till you give it your all. So find what you're good at, what you have to give, then go share your sunshine wherever you live. You might be a helper who's first on the scene, a speller, a builder, a rope jumping queen. We knew that was going to happen. A swimmer who knits, a cellist who cheers, a mutt-loving cat cuddler who volunteers. You are a blessing, a promise, a prize. You're capable, caring, courageous, and wise. You might go unnoticed or shine like a star, but wherever you go and whoever you are, don't change how you act to be just like the rest. Believe in yourself and the things you do best. So whether you're daring or careful or kind, embrace who you are and the way you're designed. Dream your own dreams, hear your own heart. You could change the world. You just have to start. Follow your path, do what you love to do, be completely, uniquely, remarkably you. So I hope that all of you get to be completely, uniquely, remarkably you. And I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has about writing or books or life in general. Yeah.
Do you always write in rhyme?
No. In fact, I've been known to write myself notes that say no rhyming, because writing in rhyme is 25 times harder than writing in prose, because you've got to get the meter right, and it's just so much harder, and it makes revising harder. This one came to me in rhyme and I couldn't talk myself out of it. I'm always very proud once I've written in rhyme, but the actual doing of it is a lot harder.
How many projects do you work on at one time?
I probably have like 5 going at once, from the just beginning idea to the almost ready to be published. So yeah, probably 5.
Well, looking back at your early work, you said was bad. What made it bad versus what is now good?
Well, there's some rules. Like every job you do has some rules, and there are rules for writing for kids. Like, for example, if the kid is trying to overcome a problem in the story, the kid has to solve it themselves. You can't have a parent or a teacher swooping in to fix it for them. And that's a mistake a lot of beginning writers make, and I made that one. If I'm rhyming, getting your meter wrong, it's very easy to write really horrible rhyme. And I was guilty of writing really horrible rhyme early on, until I actually studied like meter and structure, and like made sure that I could do it. So things like that. Or just sometimes it's an idea that just, there's been like so many books about it, it's just not new enough or original enough, but you don't know that, so you think it is, and you're wrong.
I'm thinking about the vocabulary challenge you would have. I remember one of the words there you used was about the fray or
Yeah.
the fray. At what age is that between you and the editor as to how you balance vocabulary with the age group?
Yeah, it's definitely between me and the editor. I always look at it like picture books. You've usually got the kid on your lap and the adult is reading. So then I think you can get away with a little bit more vocabulary than if the kid is sitting there trying to sound out each word themselves. Because then the adult is there to go, well, this is what it means. So if I were writing like an early reader or something, I would be a little more careful. And I have had editors sometimes go, can you make this more kid friendly? And then I do. Yeah.
How do you differentiate what you do from other authors of children's books?
Yeah, I mean, well, I read everybody I can because I think that's how you become a better writer is by reading. And so I read as many picture books. I mean, like I have holds at the library that are like perpetual, and I buy way more books than I really should financially. But I read a lot of other authors, and then I use them as sort of motivation. Like, could I do something half as cool as that? And then I actually have things where like this book led to me writing one of my own, but if you put them together, no one would ever know, but I know what it was about that one book that inspired me. So I just try to be myself and like use my own voice and trust that it'll be, you know, unique compared to other people's.
From your first inspiration to a book on the shelf, how long does it take?
Oh gosh, okay, it really varies. The quickest I've ever had it happen is like a year and a half from when I got the idea, wrote the book, to it was on the shelf. That is really fast. There have been other times where I've sold a book, an illustrator has been assigned, and then life happens, like, you know, the editor gets pregnant and goes on maternity leave. The illustrator has a family issue and takes twice as long to get the art done as, you know, normally would. So I think the longest it's been has been like 7 years. I have a book right now that's sold 2 years ago, and I'm still waiting for edits from the editor. She had a baby, but you know, so I always wish it would move a little faster. But publishing is pretty glacially slow.
Do you get writer's block, and then how do you manage?
I do get writer's block. What I find for me personally is, like, if I have something I want to work on, sometimes I still get like that fear, and so I put off starting. And then that makes me more nervous. And so I put off starting, and that makes me more nervous. If I can just force myself to sit down and start, I'm always happier. So sometimes I'm like, okay, you're going to sit down and you're going to start. And if it's awful, you can just hit deletes. And then I kind of trick myself to just get going.
You said like 20 something edits and then book tours. Do you ever get tired of having to read or do with your own books?
With the one that I revised 24 times, I was going back and forth with an editor that I really, really admire and like. But there was a time where I was just like, oh, come on, because I felt like I had, you know, done it every possible way. But usually that was an exception. Usually, like, the editor wants it to be the best it can be. I want it to be the best it can be. And so we're working towards the same goal. And I've had editors that have pushed me to, like, I thought the book was done, and by the time it really was done, it was so much better. So I'm a firm believer in you can always make it better.
What was the one that first made the New York Times bestseller?
Oh, okay. It was Be Kind, which is probably on the floor. Yeah, it was Be Kind, the one with the girl with the grape juice. That was the one. I think it came out right at a time when schools were having a lot of issues with bullying and were really trying. So a lot of schools like picked it as their all school read. So it just kind of like took off. And the interesting thing about that one is that when a book hits the New York Times list, usually if it's going to hit the list, it hits it the first week that it's out in the world. That was not the case for mine. Mine didn't make the list until 4 months after it came out. And I think it was just word of mouth where teachers were reading it and sharing it, and it just built. And the funny thing was, when it hit the New York Times list, I had just had my tonsils out at age 40 something, which I would not recommend, but I had to have it done. And it's much more painful, I've been told, when you're older. And so I'm at home in bed, hopped up on narcotics, you know, wanting to die. And my phone rings, and it's my agent. And she knew I was having this done. I'm like, why is she calling me? She knows I'm dying, you know, but I answered, and she's like, don't talk, don't say anything, you know, and she told me that the book had made the New York Times list. And so I screamed, which was not maybe a really good thing to do after tonsil surgery. But so then, you know, I felt so good emotionally and so bad physically. And then my phone started blowing up because it had been released and all my author friends were texting me. And so finally I just handed the phone to my husband. I'm like, I can't even look at this right now. So I just think it's a, you know, you can get really good news during a really otherwise bad time. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Super interesting.
But that's okay. It is time for happy hours.
All right,
So Dave.
okay. Let me grab one who knows all the great bad poetry. All right, happy dollars over here. You do. Dan's gonna dig in his pocket. He's working. Tomorrow. Here comes. All right. Okay.
Well, my happy dollar today is just seeing that yesterday, a lot of frost showed up. The growing season's kind of done and, we've had a remarkable year, you know, of growing and then you see the farmers out working so hard with all their equipment and, I guess my happy dollars to the farmers today is just saying the margins they work on, even though it's a great year, but that doesn't necessarily, when it comes to profit, but pan out because of the markets and everything. So, my happy dollar is to the farmers out there who are feeding.
Okay. The turkeys are out here. If you want to show it. If Olin wants to see turkeys, they're out here. All right. Ron. Thank you.
$400. Two of them are from last week and they didn't pay for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And $50 for the creativity. I was also happy that I was able to match up a homeless person this week with a property that they needed to be cleaned up badly. So he got some extra money and some property got cleaned up.
Two happy dollars. Today I leave, and God knows if I'll be delayed or not, but I leave for San Francisco to read books to my two grandchildren while babysitting. They're a little older now, 11 and 8, so the books get to be a little more interesting. Anyway, and the other happy thing is my youngest son is expecting a new child, and if I'm lucky, it'll be born when I'm out there.
Okay, here, Jeff.
Okay. Bringing you back. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. And it all reminds me of my kids when I was young. I'd always tell them, and it's always good to hear from other people. I would always tell them, hey, even the Beatles got turned down by everybody but Capitol Records. So, it's a good reminder that perseverance pays off. And the great thing about kids' books is when you have grandkids, you can read them again a lot. And kids' books are probably one of my favorites, just because of the pictures and the illustrations and the stories are all so fun. And you always walk away feeling like, oh, that's a great message. So that's wonderful. My other happy dollar is for my wife and I just took a trip out to the Northeast and we had a wonderful time. We camped in New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and the Finger Lakes, and we've never been out there. And if you've never been, I'm sure a lot of you have been, but if you have never been there, going to Finger Lakes are fantastic. It's all beautiful, all of them.
All right. Okay, now Jeff.
Happy dollar. So one of your books, the one with the rabbit riding the bicycle. So my grandson is infatuated with bicycles. Every time he comes over to the house, we have to ride bikes. His bike, my big bike that fits him and his sister on it, and we have read that book, your book, 1,000 times.
Or I wrote it down.
Oh, okay.
First, I'd like to thank everybody who did candy. People who got back here for the navigator, we're looking at 60 pounds or better. So that could get them through the almost 200 kids last year. So I think we got what we needed there. The other thing is, my wife and I are leaving for 2 weeks. On the first, we're gonna be down in Florida. It's gonna be straight up condo down there. It's really nice because it's not humid and there's no birds. So we're really looking at that'll be 50th anniversary will happen during that. Right? The other thing, another dollar is, Deb, thanks so much for guiding us through this last weekend. It was pretty interesting, and I think the concession program that we're in is something that we really need to take a look at, and how we can grow it and get more people involved in it, because we could make more almost a day, 8-hour day there than we can all summer doing ice cream. So some really good thoughts there. And the other thing that she was talking about, the books and stuff, this child only has 8 more years to live with you. Just think how my wife and I felt when my daughter was 3.5 years from college and decided to change her major. And there was another 3 years.
I got to spend a 3-day weekend with my grandsons this weekend. On Saturday, we went down to Sun Prairie and went around looking at the mayor for a while. They liked it. And then we went to Nitty Gritty for lunch. And then on Sunday, we went to that movie Tron Aries, which I don't understand at all. But they said it was one of the best movies. So. And then yesterday, I took them to City Hall with me, and I turned in my paperwork to be a candidate for Alder in this break.
Okay, over here. Anyone? Miss anyone? You get a free one.
Okay, well, mine would be that this past weekend, my husband and I went to a place I've never been before, North Freedom, which is about an hour from here, hadn't been, and we rode the steam train. You did like I just didn't even know that was a thing. So we did a fall color steam train pumpkin ride, and it was gorgeous.
Three. First, I want to thank Pat for being here today. It's always a pleasure. She's so much fun to have on our foundation board. She helps our marketing committee immensely. The second thing is I'm really happy to have my cousin Olivia and Owen in the area. It's been so much fun to get to hang out with him. Yes, you little dude. It's been a real joy. And third, our family is off to New Orleans tomorrow on Amtrak.
I didn't hear that.
We're going to New Orleans on Amtrak.
Yeah, but $300. Thank you for coming and speaking. We've got a lot of, yes, they're great grandkids, not my great grandkids, but my great nieces and nephews. You know, that are little, and I love giving them books because I remember reading to my daughter when she was little and just loved that. So thank you. Very interesting. And where can we find them? Anywhere?
They're all on Amazon. If you want to buy local, which I always recommend, Barnes and Noble has some, Room of One's Own has some, Mystery Museum and Rose Street, all those places.
Okay, cool, thank you. And then I was gone last week. My husband and I, we went out to Utah. Dan went east. We went west.
We do that.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we had a beautiful time out in Utah when we were up in the mountains. So saw the first snow long before we normally see the first snow, but it was beautiful weather for hiking. So we had a great time. And I want to thank everybody who helped out at the game on Saturday. We had a lot of fun, as Jen said, but the game really wasn't a lot of fun. But I met some nice people. I think other people did as well. So it was Jen, Rich, and Steve, and Dan, and Terry, and Jen, and Jim. So we got the biggest area we've ever had. So we actually had a lot of room to work, which was nice. Dan was Mr. Johnny on the spot. I mean, I just have to call that out because we were all doing our thing, but you know, if there was a lull in what he was doing, he was back there filling the coolers and getting more supplies out and all of that kind of stuff. He was like running circles, which was great.
McDonald's training.
Your McDonald's training, that's what
He was a utility guy.
So, yeah, he was our utility player for sure.
I had the time. Nobody else did.
So, but it was fun. As Rich said, I really think that we need to look at that for future income, revenue for this club. I think it's a good fundraising opportunity. I think we do have to be selective though. We know what works well, hockey. If you're doing winter sports, hockey works better than basketball, which works better than volleyball, just because you've got the periods in there. So then people come out and get the food and the drink, where if you miss 3 minutes, 5 minutes of basketball, you might have missed a lot. So people aren't as likely to come out and do that. So I think if we play it right, I think we can do much better. And again, Ann's going to do the update for the foundation. So one of the things we'll be reporting on is what we earned last year at those concessions that we did. So you'll see the numbers there as well. So, and then I had 3, but I know I talked a lot. My daughter, she still needs us, so I was happy about that. She had to go to an appointment for her wisdom teeth, and she's like, Mom, can you go with me? And I'm like, oh, she still needs me.
All right, Madam President.
All right, you can put me down for 3, that'd be fantastic.
3, I'm gonna go.
3. So, thank you to our author, that was super interesting and wonderful, and, you know, got a good time for Mr. Owens to be here, which leads me to my second, which is thanks to all of you for being such a accommodating and kind group of people, so that this all worked out, so I could bring little man here. And then the third being that it has been a delightful week to have him here. And I will miss him when he moves to New York, but it's a little closer than LA, a little bit closer, so we can see him hopefully more often. All right, next part, ready? Can I walk over here? We're gonna walk over here, and we're gonna have the person who are coming to our ticket. If you dare read the last 3 numbers. 6 of 6, 9. Yep. All right, now this is gonna be tricky. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. Maybe. Nope. We're gonna put it down. Ready? On the loose.
So while Jen's getting out the cards, we were talking and we realized not everybody knows what this money goes for. What did you get there? We got a Queen of Hearts. All right.
He gets to get.
Yeah, he gets to get it. But the money, that half of it goes into the drawing, which if Aaron would have picked the Ace of Spades today, would have been $195 for Aaron to do with what he wants. But the other half of it goes towards Polio Plus. It gets divided in thirds. Polio Plus, the Sun Prairie Rotary Foundation, our own foundation, and then the emergency food pantry. So every week when we draw, half of that money goes into those 3 pots, and then we give the money out to those specific areas. When we get like $500 or $1,000, we'll send it into either for Polio Plus, or we will give it to the food pantry to help to assist them as well. So,
thank you. My sheet has gone, so we're going to use that as our Rotary knowledge for today, because that, after all, is Rotary knowledge. And with that, oh, I'm trying to hit this again. Are you ready? All right, here we go. No, not so much. Fair enough. Ready? Here. Here's the
Can't move until you do it.
Oh,
Thanks, Teresa.
Okay, really?